Famed author Frederick Douglass worked tirelessly as an abolitionist and an advocate for equal rights.
You can't talk about the history of civil rights in this country without talking about Frederick Douglass. Long before Dr. King, the civil rights movement, here's a man who was talking about basic dignity for people in this country.
Born into slavery in Talbot County, Maryland, around 1818, Frederick Douglass became educated first through his master's wife and eventually on his own. Douglass escaped slavery in 1838 by fleeing to New York and became a preacher the following year.
Certainly, during Douglass's time, literacy for Africans was absolutely forbidden. In fact, it was very clear that once Africans could read and write, many wrote their own passes, which allowed them to move from place to place, and obviously this was disruptive to a very repressive system.
After his anti-slavery lectures caught the attention of William Lloyd Garrison, the editor of the abolitionist paper, The Liberator, Douglass began touring the United States as a speaker with the American Anti-Slavery Society.
Many whites refused to believe that Frederick Douglass had ever been a slave because he was so obviously intelligent, he was such a powerful speaker.
In 1845, Douglass wrote and published his first autobiography entitled Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Although the book was a U.S. bestseller, Douglass was forced to live in Europe for 2 years to evade recapture. He ultimately purchased his freedom in 1847.
People were shocked about Frederick Douglass, an ex-slave, writing his autobiography, and it was so poignant, and it was such a bird's-eye view of what was going on the plantation. He put it in very plain language, and it was just a powerful testimony of why slavery needed to end in our country.
Douglass became the only African American to attend the first Women's Rights Convention in 1848, and by 1861, Douglass was famous nationwide, advising both President Lincoln and Johnson on the welfare of African Americans.
By any measure, Frederick Douglass was a real American hero. He was a public intellectual, he was a statesman, he was an activist, and his life and his political commitment were dedicated to human rights, not just to civil rights or to the end of slavery.
During his lifetime, Douglass was U.S. Ambassador to the Dominican Republic, and in 1872, he became the first African American to appear on a presidential ballot when he was nominated as vice president. Frederick Douglass died on February 20th, 1895, from natural causes.